The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's Friday, and these cords are wrapped all over everything. Nobody ever puts their cords back properly. They were tangled up in a chair.
Well, before us was Cal Fiola, Paul Schmidt.
Well, that explains
Matt
it.
Malone, Matt Malone, and Rebecca Cusack.
Oh, the government was here. No wonder everything's in disarray. It's like our taxes. Well,
Speaking of taxes, on yesterday I received copies of a public records request on Mary Sahady, because her contract expired at the end of last year, as you're well aware.
Yes.
She was given a short extension to get it up until the 5th of January. Which is interesting because the mayor wasn't signed in didn't get sworn in until the 6th of January.
Yeah.
But she got an extension, and then she signed a new contract as Chief Financial Officer, good until January 5th, 2022.
Okay. Well, now I'm looking at this public records request response. It makes a lot more sense. I did have three discussions on this. That's one of the reasons I'm late, because Mayor Coogan called me because I guess one of my conversations with Councilor Pereira
Immediately got back to him.
who immediately ran to City Hall, I guess, based on this. But they asked me about bargaining protocols and stuff, and I just look. First of all, I'm happy that like I said, that we have a mayor that actually reaches out and tries to clarify things, even if we agree or disagree on issues. But I read this, and it's quick. A 90-day notice of intent to renew Mrs. Sahady's contract was not issued.
Right.
Now, I think the contention is that these are mandatory. At least some people believe it's mandatory, and frankly, I don't know. I would have to now double check.
Neither do I.
There was an implication that it is mandatory with the new charter for these positions to come before the council, and that a 90-day notice of intent may be required. But I will be absolutely truthful. I'm not sure. Now, I know that because this is for administrators and basically management, quote unquote, employees. Now, when you bargain for a unit, when you bargain like I did, and most of the places I consulted with were for unions, like nurses unions and DPW unions and fire unions and police unions. The process is you have to sign a letter of intent to open negotiations. That's part of the process, because you don't go in a back room and make a deal. You just don't walk in a back room. That's actually prohibited by 150E. You can't bargain with groups, because that's what would happen. You walk in and you break the union up into little subgroups, and you deal with them individually, and it gives management too much bargaining power. So that's prohibited under 150E. But when we're talking about management personnel, well, they kind of stand alone. Some of them, they're salaried, they work at the mayor's behest. And most of the contracts I've seen are they're nothing. Basically a couple of lines, where when you deal with a collective bargaining agreement for people who actually work, everything has to be spelled out.
It's a book.
It is. It's a book, and we give the members a book. It's a book of, what the overtime rules are, the rotation lists, and what the vacations are. Everything is there. But when you look at some of these contracts we've seen, they're a half a page long. And they're open-ended intentionally. That's how they end up with stipends and things like that nobody knows about. And I'm not sure if there's a legal requirement in the charter now. So they called me about the notice, and I said, well, the only thing I can correlate it to is when you bargain for a group, you have to file a letter of intent to negotiate. So I would assume that if what they were telling me, and I'm not sure, you shouldn't assume. So what I'm saying is all I related was that in these circumstances, I can see there being a requirement for an intent to renew. If the charter stipulation in the charter again, here we go, CJ.
I hear ya.
The charter and its interpretation again, which should be scrapped. That's why we're going to try to scrap it. Again, the charter requires it to come before the council. So I would say that this 90-day notice somewhere is in one of the interpretations of the charter, so that the city council would know that there's ongoing bargaining for that position, or bargaining on the horizon. So it says a 90-day was not issued, so therefore that could have been problematic. Mrs. Sahady's employment agreement was extended on December 10th, 2019. Now, we know that we had acting Mayor Cliff Ponte then. Am I
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
All right. Now it said it was extended on December 10th until January 5th, which was the day before the inauguration.
Correct.
Now, that extension actually was only a 5-day extension, because I believe her agreement went to the 31st of December.
I believe so.
So it was fundamentally a 5-day extension to allow the incoming mayor to make a final decision. Now, it says, and a new contract was executed on January 8th, 2020, for the period of January 6th through January 20th, 2020 through January 5th, 2022. And then it says, I trust that this response sufficiently satisfies and concludes your public records request. Well, the only thing I see here, and I question, is the bargaining concluded on the 8th, and they're going to pay her from the 6th, and okay, wait a minute. I just got a.
Yeah, the 90-day notice to renew was in her previous contract, not the charter.
Well, now we got another issue to deal with, because now we're dealing with
Contracts.
the contract language. So okay. So if the 90-day requirement for an intent to renew, that brings up another question, and I'm not going to get into it, because these are all hypotheticals now. If somebody wants to now say that they don't agree with the process, they have the right to do that. Because the only thing I see in this is she got a contract executed on the 8th, which means that the 6th and the 7th, technically, she wasn't employed. Was she?
I guess not.
Because her extension went to the 5th, right?
And I think that's why a lot of people were asking
And
questions.
yeah, well, the thing is that if and they'll say, well, she was still doing a job and she was still there and they gave her retroactive pay, but the problem is she wasn't technically an employee. And I remember, I think recently on Bob Carrere, they told how she was so magnanimous in volunteering her free time and without pay, because technically, I'll give you a hypothetical. It's to say, well, that's, you know, you're cutting hairs. Well, cutting hairs on this individual, but she gets a lot of money. 2 days pays off. But let's say for a hypothetical, I'm bargaining for the firefighters, as I did many times. And we settle a contract with retroactive. Now, the retroactive goes back 6 months. And I got guys now in a collective bargaining agreement that came on the job 4 months before the retroactive initial date. Do those guys get 2 months pay for free because now they're in a collective bargaining agreement? No. They were not under contract for that period. So that's the only thing I see with that, because they're paying her. But then again, what the hell? They gave her a $40,000 pay raise. Who cares? You know how I feel about...
Plus a stipend.
You know how I feel. You know, I'm perfectly clear about her. You can't get a straight answer from her. I know that the transition team was having issues. Yesterday at an insurance advisory committee meeting, someone asked her what percentage of the city budget the health care was, and the answer was, oh, I'll have to get back to you. I have to check that. So the CFO doesn't know that. She should know at least a ballpark percentage, because that's her job. So you know how I feel about her and her. They've been around. They're not old guard or new guard. Theoretically, her and her firm are the ancient guard, the royal and ancient guard, because they've been around since, well, before, in the 80s. Because in 91, we initiated that grievance in 90, and it went to 91. And the error we found, the auditor was Bruce Haig from Haig and Sahady. They've been auditing the books for decades. And they were auditing it during the 5 accounts that were never picked up, that were dormant for 25 years. 2008, again, putting employee money in the wrong place. Again in 16, and numerous other screw-ups with not doing it. And the fact is that they're being paid to audit. So the question is always begged, why didn't they find this? It's not that they haven't had enough practice. They've been doing it for 30 years. So my displeasure with this particular CFO, I disagree with the position, period, because as far as I'm concerned, we got an auditor, we got a treasurer. Why do we need somebody else? And they even got a treasurer over in the school department. So we got 2 treasurers. So we got a CFO. So, you know, but that issue about this contract, I guess, is going to be, somebody may make an issue out of this, because if it's in her present agreement and he didn't do it, now we have a bigger question. Are political appointees exempt from the rules that everybody else has to follow? That's the question I have, because as a negotiator, we were very, very careful to open up negotiations within the window that was required. Otherwise, the city could refuse to negotiate, just like the grievance procedure. You file a grievance, there are time limits on each step of a grievance. You have to track it. And if there's some reason that you can't make a limit because you're getting, accruing evidence, or the lawyer can't make it, you have to get the other side, the city, to agree that we're going to delay it before we move it to the next step, because it's automatically either moved to the next step or thrown out. So, just like in real life, the taxpayers have a different set of rules than the politicians. We see what's going on in politics in Washington. We see what goes on in politics in Boston. And now we're going to see if Because to me, the greater question is someone who had to always follow the rules. Nobody ever gave us a freebie. Nobody ever gave us a stipend without us fighting tooth and nail. Nobody ever gave us a pay raise without a fight. We didn't hold signs. We didn't do anything. We fought. We proved we deserved it. We did the studies. We showed the records. We went to arbitration twice and beat the city twice. And the first element of an arbitration is to prove the city's ability to pay. And in spite of their assertions that they did not have the ability to pay, we proved they had the ability to pay, and we won every single element of those 2 arbitrations. So, you know, this is something that I obviously am very interested in because, you know, this is what I've done most of my adult life. And I had to follow rules. I didn't get to just walk in a back room and make a deal. Hey, by the way, give me a $40,000 pay raise. Okay. It's not the way it worked for us. And, you know, let's see what happens with this. I mean, you got to follow the rules. I'm not happy. I'll go on record right now. They extended their contract. I'm not happy with that selection. I think, number one, we shouldn't have a CFO. And if we do, it should not be the one that we have.
And the worst part is, let's go back to, you know, and I'm going to do this all the time. I mean, I'm not saying anything I'm not talking out of school or anything. But Paul said that all positions will require, they'll be posted, there'll be applications, and there'll be interviews. He said that. He said all positions will be posted. And the people who are qualified will have them. Now, this is what, the second position that wasn't posted? We had the corporate counsel, which wasn't posted. Now we have the CFO's position that wasn't posted. What else isn't going to be posted? Now, I submitted to the mayor's office a request to be placed on the RDA. I figured I'd take a shot in the dark and see what happens, you know?
Oh, God, that is so funny.
Now,
I got to see you at the RDA meeting.
Now, I got an email back from Ann O'Neill Souza saying that submit your resume for the mayor's review. My resume is 15 pages long.
Yeah, they forgot you got more degrees than a thermometer, right?
So I have to milk that down to something that I can send in one
send
page.
the whole 15 in.
Then they're going to give them all to the city council. Can you see them even trying to review it?
Good. It's about time they find out how qualified you are, or overqualified in this case. But no, look, I can tell you, Paul said he's going to check to see about that renewal thing, so I'm glad we got the clarification that it was not in the charter, that it was in her contract.
It's in her contract.
Which to me, obviously, but see, that's the problem we always have. We sit here and talk about all the time. This is just a symptom of a much larger problem about there are 2 sets of rules. There's a set of rules for politicians and rich people, and there's a set of rules for the grunts, the rest of the world.
Exactly.
We have to follow the rules without deviation, but when you look at private appointees and stuff, public appointees and these things like that, there's no rules. It's like, oh, I remember sitting in a meeting one time when we were doing the new director of the retirement board's contract, and I went, well, we've got to do this, and we're going to sign a contract, but we haven't defined exactly what some of these benefits are. And I was told, oh, you don't have to. I said, you don't? No. Yeah, we can kind of fill in the blanks later. Well, and it's legal. Well, I couldn't do that. When we were dealing with stuff, it's not in a contract. You don't have it. You don't sign a contract till it's complete. Then if you want something else that's not in a contract, you got to reopen up negotiations. And if you agree to something in the middle of a long-term contract, you have to attach a side letter of agreement. But there's a process. It's not just, oh, yeah, well, look, we'll give him the job and figure out what he's going to get later. So everything that's happened here may be 100% legal. I'm not sure if you can ignore contract language that says that. I don't know the contract, and I'll be frank, I didn't see it. I'd have to look at the contract. Because if it says there shall be a letter, a 90-day letter of intent, well, a shall is, that's it. That means it has to be. It has to be done. If it's worded differently and makes it optional, well, then it's a different story. But now you got my interest piqued. I want to see the contract now.
Imagine that.
I want to see the contract, because if it says, there shall be, which I don't think it probably will, because one thing about them, they're bright enough not to lock themselves in, because then it gives them a lot more flexibility. But the working man can't make backroom deals. As a matter of fact, it's prohibited.
Isn't that why there's no provision in most of the city contracts, or if not all, that doesn't have a provision to remove somebody with cause?
Yep.
A termination clause?
That's right. Because then they could remove them.
Right. And they wouldn't have to pay off a contract.
That's right. They wouldn't have to pay off their contract. Exactly. And that's why we always call for it. It's just like many years ago, we had some people that were politically connected go to the city on their own. We sat at the table. The city offered a benefit from part of our membership. And I was flabbergasted. And I looked at the city and I said, and it was a pretty good benefit too, by the way. So I really tortured him that day because it was fun. I said, we're going to tentatively accept this. Oh, the big smiles came across their faces. And I said, but give us some time to caucus. We're going to caucus and we're going to write up language. Okay. They went out of the room, so we wrote up language. He came back in the room, slid the language over to him. These are all staff positions. And you know how people get staff positions?
Yes, I do.
They don't take a test for staff positions. They get them because they know somebody. So, and it was like a half-step raise, so it was like a 7.5% increase in their pay. That's a big increase.
That's a big chunk.
Huge.
Not like Mary Sahady's increase.
No, nowhere near Mary Sahady's, which was 50%. But I wrote that we'll accept this, and all of these positions come up for bid by seniority. They had a stroke. What? We can't accept this. I said, why can't you accept it? You just said that because of the job and the qualifications that they have to. Well, these guys all went to this school and that school and that school. Then I went, wait a minute. They didn't have this school, that school, and this school when they got there. They were sent there on the city's dime to go down to the National Fire Academy to get the training.
Right.
So there were no pre-existing conditions of employment. All they had to be was a firefighter. So we can do the same thing with the things after these people bid by seniority. They pulled the thing, and I said, then I finished them. I gave them the coup de grace. I said, if you ever do this again, I'm going to hit you with an unfair labor practice, because it's a prohibited practice under 150E to bargain with anybody but the designated collective bargaining agent, which is the unit. You can't bargain with individuals or groups within a bargaining unit. And I said, if you ever do it again, I said, because I knew who they were doing it to. And it's amazing. And one of the guys is a fire commissioner right now. So they tried to get their friends a pay raise. But when it was open to the regular guy, the guy that said, well, I've been on a job 30 years fighting fires. I got a couple of years to go. I'll bid for a staff position and bump up my pension a little bit. We don't want that. We don't want the regular people to get it. And that's what disturbs me about stuff like this. I've seen too much of these abuses to not be a little jaded when it comes to stuff like this.
Just a little. Just a little. Not a lot, just a little.
Just a little.
And I want people to realize that we talk about these things because they are important. A doctor, when he talks to you about some symptoms you're having, He wants to find out what the disease is. Well, we're talking about a lot of the symptoms, and we know what the disease is. The problem is nobody wants to hear it. You know, they make excuses. Well, mayors have always appointed people that they know. They got to appoint people they trust. They got to appoint people that they, have supported them. Bullshit.
Well, not only that, CJ, the problem with this is the further next step is that the problem is when you turn your head and use that excuse, well, that's the way they do it. Well, they do it because they get away with it.
Exactly.
You gotta stop it. And the problem is that not only did they do it, and these people get these big salaries, but they never go away. Case in point, Falsfiore.
Yep.
Case in point, Chris Piragno. Case in point, if you go back to every administration, they put in some of their friends in jobs, and then when they were gone, they remain. They slide them into some department, and then you wonder why some of these departments don't do their jobs accurately, because they put people in that were totally unqualified to do the job. And that's what happens in these scenarios.
And that's why
they
bodies
never
get
go
buried
away.
in the wrong grave.
Yeah, and people go, well, that's the way it is. Well, that's the way it shouldn't be. Again, the two wrongs make a right scenario, not two wrongs don't make a right. You shouldn't do this. You should look, if you got a friend who's qualified, and actually, too bad we're running out of time. I just got an email that somebody's going to email us the contract. Well,
Oh, no, I know. I've got a copy of the contract, too. I believe that same person emailed me a copy of the contract. But if he sends it over to me, I'll make sure it gets forwarded to you
in next
rapidly.
show, we'll expand on it. But look, like I said, I don't know. But the only thing we can say without reservation is there are two sets of rules. Those for the rich, and we go back to the New Bedford Standard Times Sunday paper many moons ago that said, if you're a worker, work in New Bedford. If you're an administrator and an appointee, work in Fall River.
Exactly. It's going to be interesting to see how many more promises aren't kept. Because he promised a true transparency in government. We've heard this how many times from politicians? Now it's time for us to finally get it. And if we don't get it, we got to do something about it.
Well, hopefully we'll see some changes for the positive, and we're going to see because, as I said, Paul and I could always disagree without being disagreeable. He appointed Mary Sahady to stay for another 2 years. She's been here for well over 30, and as far as I'm concerned, she's never done the job up to the standard she should as a CPA. Going back on the long term to the $2 million in health care money that wasn't caught with an audit by her firm, and more recently, not checking Jazel's credit cards because she does have a fiduciary obligation to ensure that the taxpayers' money is paid out properly.
And the worst part about it is nobody's doing anything about these problems. People are afraid for some reason, and I don't understand why. Because I know that if I had the documents, I know that if I had the paperwork, I'd file them. I'd go right to the Board of Accountancy.
Yeah.
I'd go right to the Board of Accountancy. There's no question about it.
That is not out of the realm of possibility. I think taxpayers should go there and question, because what they did with Jazel's credit card and what they did with his pay, she should have been there as the CFO with a fiduciary obligation to ensure that this money is spent properly, ensure that that was proper, and it wasn't. So.
And of course, we'll keep an eye on these things, and we'll keep looking for where these problems are happening. Because you know why? If we don't look, nobody's going to know. Because nobody wants to find where
and the question is, the haves and the have-nots, are you one of the chosen or one of the deplorables?
I'm one of the deplorables, I can tell you that now. Hey, everybody. It's a long weekend. We won't be on the air on Monday because it's Martin Luther King Day, and they are having a Martin Luther King breakfast here at BCC at 8:30 in the morning. Feel free to come by. Have a great day and a great weekend.
And have a good holiday weekend.